The morning fog lifted from Monterey Bay to reveal what would become the most extraordinary rescue in naval history when 8-year-old Iris Murphy whispered 3 simple words that would save the lives of 130 sailors trapped aboard a crippled submarine. What the panicked crowd of Marines, Navy engineers and town officials gathered at the emergency command center didn't know was that this quiet little girl with pigtails and a backpack full of marine biology homework had spent years learning submarine systems from her father, who everyone in their coastal community believed was just a humble research technician at the local marine station, but was actually Captain Leonard "Wave" Murphy, the legendary submarine engineer who had designed the very power systems now failing catastrophically beneath the dark waters of the bay. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The emergency sirens pierced the calm. Tuesday morning air across Naval Submarine Base, Point Coral, as 8-year-old Iris Murphy walked hand in hand with her mother toward the Chen Marine Research Station. Dr. Laura Murphy adjusted her research notebook under her arm, her auburn hair catching the early sunlight as she pointed out a pod of dolphins breaking the surface near the harbor entrance. Iris's bright green eyes followed the graceful arcs of the marine mammals, but her attention was drawn to something far more concerning happening at the naval facility across the bay. "Mom, look at all those boats," Iris said, tugging gently on her mother's lab coat sleeve. "Something's wrong over there." Laura followed her daughter's gaze toward the submarine base where Coast Guard cutters, Navy rescue vessels, and emergency response boats were converging in patterns that spoke of crisis rather than routine training. The morning's peaceful atmosphere was rapidly giving way to something far more serious, though at 8 years old, Iris couldn't yet comprehend the magnitude of what was unfolding beneath the dark waters of Monterey Bay. At that very moment, 100 feet below the surface, Commander Stanley Mitchell gripped the periscope housing as another power fluctuation plunged the USS Nautilus into emergency lighting. The massive submarine, designed to operate silently in the deepest ocean trenches, was now trapped by a catastrophic failure of its primary electrical systems during what should have been a routine training exercise in the shallow waters near. "Sure, sir, we've lost main power to the propulsion systems," Chief Petty Officer Gloria Campos reported from her station, her weathered hands moving quickly across the control panel as she attempted to reroute power through backup systems. "Emergency. Batteries are holding, but at current drain rate, we have maybe 6 hours before life support becomes critical." Lieutenant Kevin Torres, barely 25 and on his first submarine deployment, felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool temperature maintained throughout the vessel. "Commander, should I signal for emergency surface procedures?" "Negative," Mitchell replied grimly, studying the depth readings that showed they were sitting in just 90 feet of water, close enough to the surface that emergency ascent should have been routine. "The ballast control systems are tied to the same power grid that's failing. We surface wrong in these shallow waters. We could breach at the wrong angle and endanger every vessel on the surface trying to help us." The submarine had been conducting a training exercise designed to test the crew's response to simulated electrical failures when the simulation became terrifyingly real. What had started as a controlled training scenario was now a life-threatening emergency affecting 130 sailors whose families believed they were participating in a routine exercise that would bring them home safely for dinner. On the surface, Captain Clarence Cooper stood in the emergency command center that had been hastily erected on the dock at Naval Submarine Base Point Coral, his face grim as he studied the tactical displays showing the submarine's position and the converging rescue assets. At 52, Cooper had commanded the Marine base for 3 years and had never faced a crisis of this magnitude. The political implications alone were staggering, but the human cost of failure was something that would haunt him for the rest of his career. "Sir, we have Admiral Beverly Marine on secure satellite link from Pacific Fleet Headquarters," Sergeant First Class Victor Reed announced, holding a secure communications handset that connected directly to the Pentagon's Crisis Management Center. Cooper accepted the handset with the weight of command settling heavily on his shoulders. "Admiral, this is Captain Cooper. Situation report. USS Nautilus is disabled at 90 feet with complete power system failure. 130 souls on board with approximately 6 hours of life support remaining on emergency power. Admiral." Marine's voice carried the crisp authority of someone who had spent 30 years making decisions that affected thousands of lives. "Captain, I'm authorizing immediate deployment of all available deep-sea rescue assets. Pacific Fleet submarine rescue vessels are en route from San Diego, but they won't arrive for at least 8 hours. What are your local capabilities?" The question hit Cooper like a physical blow, because the honest answer was that local capabilities were severely limited when dealing with submarine emergencies of this magnitude. The Coast Guard had excellent surface rescue equipment, but submarines presented unique challenges that required specialized expertise and equipment that simply wasn't stationed at every coastal facility. "Admiral, we have Coast Guard rescue coordination with Captain Lisa Anderson, local marine biology expertise through the research station, and emergency medical facilities at Point Coral Naval Medical Facility. However, our submarine-specific rescue capabilities are limited until the San Diego assets arrive." "Understood, Captain. I'm also authorizing consultation with any available submarine engineering expertise in your area. This is not the time for standard operating procedures. Get me solutions, not explanations." As Cooper ended the call, he turned to Dr. Joaquin Silva, who had arrived from the Marine Research Station with a team of oceanographers and marine engineers. Silva's weathered face reflected years of studying the ocean conditions around Monterey Bay, and his expertise in underwater operations had been requested by the emergency coordination team. "Dr. Silva, what are the ocean conditions affecting any rescue attempt?" Cooper asked, recognizing that successful rescue operations required understanding every environmental factor that could impact the effort. Silva consulted his tablet displaying real-time oceanographic data collected by the research station's monitoring buoys. "Captain, we have optimal conditions for surface operations, minimal wave action, excellent visibility, and stable weather patterns. However, the submarine's position is in an area where underwater currents could complicate any rescue attempts involving divers or submersible vehicles." Meanwhile, Diana Foster from the local Channel 7 News had arrived at the public viewing area adjacent to the naval facility, her cameraman capturing footage of the growing rescue operation while she prepared to report on what was rapidly becoming a major regional news story. Her reporter's instincts told her this was more than a routine military exercise gone wrong. This is Diana Foster reporting from Monterey Bay, where a major emergency rescue operation is underway involving a disabled Navy submarine, she announced to her camera, gesturing toward the collection of emergency vessels visible in the background. Sources confirm that more than 100 sailors are trapped underwater, while military officials work frantically to coordinate rescue efforts. Back at the research station, Leonard Murphy looked up from the marine biology samples he was cataloging as the emergency sirens continued to wail across the bay. His co-workers knew him as a quiet, methodical researcher who preferred laboratory work to field work. But the sound of those sirens triggered memories and knowledge that he had deliberately buried when he chose family life over military service 8 years ago. Dr. Amanda Foster, a marine biology colleague who had worked with Leonard for 6 years, noticed his concerned expression as he watched the emergency vessels through the laboratory windows. "Leonard, that looks serious. Think they'll want our assistance with ocean, current data, or marine environmental factors?" Leonard continued studying the rescue operation with the trained eye of someone who understood exactly what was happening beneath the surface and the complexities involved in submarine emergency procedures. Probably, submarine operations in shallow water present unique challenges, especially if there are power system failures affecting ballast control. The casual observation was more technically sophisticated than Amanda expected from someone whose daily work involved water sample analysis and marine ecosystem monitoring. She had always known Leonard was intelligent and well-educated, but his understanding of submarine operations seemed unusually detailed for a research technician. "How do you know so much about submarine operations?" she asked with genuine curiosity. Leonard realized he had revealed more knowledge than was consistent with his carefully maintained cover story. "I read a lot about military technology. Helps me understand how naval operations might affect marine ecosystems in the bay." As the morning progressed and the emergency situation intensified, Leonard found himself facing an internal struggle between his desire to maintain his family's privacy and his growing awareness that his specialized knowledge might be needed to save the lives of 130 sailors trapped beneath the waters where his daughter played and learned about marine life every day. The decision about whether to reveal his true identity and expertise was rapidly being taken out of his hands by circumstances beyond his control, and Leonard Murphy realized that the quiet life he had built for his family in Monterey Bay was about to be challenged by the same kind of crisis that had driven him away from military service in the first place. Iris continued walking with her mother toward the research station, unaware that within hours she would be standing before a crowd of desperate military officials offering a solution that none of their experts had considered, and that her simple observation would expose her father's carefully guarded secret, while saving more lives than anyone thought possible. The morning fog had lifted completely now, revealing the full scope of the emergency operation and setting the stage for what would become the most remarkable rescue in naval history, orchestrated not by admirals or engineering experts, but by an 8-year-old girl who had learned submarine systems from bedtime stories told by a father whose own distinguished service record was hidden away in a box in their attic, waiting for a moment when duty would once again call him back to the sea. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. By 10 o'clock, the Chen Marine Research Station had transformed from a peaceful scientific facility into an auxiliary command center as military officials requisitioned office space, communication equipment, and every piece of oceanographic data the researchers could provide. Iris sat quietly in the corner of her mother's laboratory, working on her math homework while listening to increasingly urgent conversations about underwater rescue operations that seemed to grow more desperate with each passing hour. Professor Judith Parker arrived from Stanford's Naval Engineering Department in a black sedan that kicked up gravel as it pulled into the research station parking lot. At 63, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had spent 40 years solving impossible engineering problems, but her face showed the strain of being summoned to address a crisis that was testing the limits of current technology. "Dr. Silva, I've reviewed the preliminary reports during my drive here," she announced, spreading technical blueprints across the laboratory bench where Iris had been quietly observing the adult conversations. "The USS Nautilus is equipped with a Mark 7 emergency power management system that should have multiple redundancies. For complete power failure to occur, we're looking at either catastrophic damage or a fundamental design flaw that nobody anticipated. Dr. Silva gestured toward the underwater monitoring equipment that displayed real-time data from the submarine's location. Professor, our acoustic monitoring shows the vessel is structurally intact. No signs of hull breach or collision damage. Whatever's happening is purely electrical or electronic. Iris looked up from her multiplication tables, her young mind processing the technical discussion with understanding that surprised the adults who noticed her attention. Her father had explained submarine power systems during their evening walks along the beach, using simple analogies that made complex engineering concepts accessible to an 8-year-old's curiosity. The submarine has backup power systems, right? Iris asked quietly, her question directed toward Professor Parker with the innocent directness that children used when seeking information. Professor Parker looked down at the small girl with surprise, not expecting technical questions from someone who appeared to be working on elementary school homework. Yes, dear, submarines have multiple backup systems. That's what makes this situation so unusual. All the backups should be working. But what if the backups are connected to the same thing that broke? Iris continued, her green eyes showing. The logical thinking that her father had been nurturing through years of patient teaching about how complex systems worked. The question created a moment of silence in the laboratory, as the adult experts realized that an 8-year-old had identified a critical design vulnerability that they had been overlooking in their focus on individual component failures. Professor Parker stared at Iris with growing respect for the child's intuitive understanding of system interdependencies. Meanwhile, at the Naval Base Emergency Command Center, tensions were escalating as rescue assets continued arriving without, bringing solutions to the fundamental problem of how to restore power to a submarine whose electrical systems had failed in ways that defied standard emergency procedures. Master Chief John Harrison, a 30-year submarine veteran, stood before a wall of monitors displaying every piece of available data about the USS Nautilus. "Sir, we've established communication with the submarine through emergency acoustic systems," Harrison reported to Captain Cooper, his weathered face showing the strain of watching fellow submariners face a crisis he understood better than anyone else in the room. Commander Mitchell reports that emergency life support is functioning, but they're experiencing intermittent failures in systems that should be completely independent of the main power grid. Captain Cooper studied the technical displays with growing frustration, as each new piece of information seemed to contradict established understanding of how submarine electrical systems were designed to function. "Master Chief, explain to me how a submarine specifically engineered for redundancy can have cascading failures across multiple independent systems." "Sir, I've been on submarines for 3 decades and I've never seen anything like this," Harrison admitted, his honesty carrying the weight of extensive experience with emergency situations. The Mark 7 system was designed by some of the finest naval engineers in the country. For it to fail, this completely suggests either sabotage or a fundamental design flaw that somehow escaped detection during years of testing. The mention of potential sabotage added a new dimension of concern to the crisis, raising questions about national security implications that went far beyond the immediate rescue operation. Captain Cooper realized that regardless of the cause, his primary responsibility remained the safety of the submarine crew. But the political ramifications were becoming increasingly complex. Chief Warrant Officer Danny O'Brien approached the command group with a secure communication device that connected directly to the Pentagon's Emergency Response Center. "Captain, Admiral Marine is requesting an immediate status update and asking specifically about any available submarine engineering expertise in the local area." Cooper accepted the device while processing the Admiral's request for local expertise. Realizing that standard military resources were proving inadequate for this unprecedented situation. "Admiral, this is Captain Cooper. The situation remains critical with no change in the submarine's power status. We have Stanford Naval Engineering consultation on site, but the failures are exceeding our current understanding of the system's design parameters." Admiral Marine's response carried the urgency of someone coordinating resources across multiple military commands while facing political pressure from the highest levels of government. "Captain, I'm authorizing you to consult with any available expertise, regardless of current security clearances or military status. Find me someone who understands submarine power systems better than our current consultants." The authorization to seek assistance from non-military sources opened possibilities that Cooper hadn't previously considered, but it also reflected the desperation of a situation where conventional approaches were failing to produce results. As he ended the call, Cooper realized he needed to expand his search for expertise beyond the obvious military and academic sources. Dr. Kevin Chang, who had driven down from Stanford's Marine Engineering Laboratory, was setting up sophisticated diagnostic equipment that could analyze the acoustic signatures from the disabled submarine. His years of research into underwater vehicle systems had earned him recognition as one of the leading civilian experts in submarine technology. But even his advanced equipment was providing confusing data about the Nautilus's condition. "Professor Parker, these acoustic readings are inconsistent with any documented failure modes," Dr. Chang reported, his voice carrying the frustration of someone whose expertise was being challenged by an unprecedented situation. "The power systems appear to be cycling on and off in patterns that suggest electrical feedback loops rather than component failures." Professor Parker joined Dr. Chang at his monitoring station, studying the complex waveform displays that represented the electrical activity detected from the submarine. Feedback loops would indicate that the emergency power systems are interfering with each other rather than providing redundancy. That would be a catastrophic design flaw that should have been detected during testing. The technical discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Lieutenant Colonel Susan Brooks from the Pentagon's Advanced Naval Systems Division, her military bearing commanding immediate attention from everyone in the Emergency Command Center. At 45, Brooks had spent 20 years overseeing the development and deployment of advanced naval technologies, and her presence indicated that the crisis had escalated to the highest levels of military leadership. "Professor Parker, Dr. Chang, I need your immediate assessment of whether this failure pattern could have been caused by external interference or represents an inherent design vulnerability," Brooks announced, her tone carrying the authority of someone empowered to make decisions that could affect national security policy. The question about external interference raised the specter of foreign sabotage or cyber attack capabilities that could threaten the entire submarine fleet, transforming a rescue operation into a potential national security investigation. Professor Parker exchanged concerned glances with Dr. Chang before responding to the Lieutenant Colonel's inquiry. "Colonel, the failure patterns are consistent with internal system conflicts rather than external attack, but we can't rule out sophisticated interference that might trigger cascading failures designed to look like equipment malfunctions," Professor Parker replied carefully, recognizing the implications of her assessment for both the immediate rescue operation and broader military policy. Back at the research station, Iris had finished her homework and was now openly listening to the technical discussions that continued around her mother's laboratory. Her understanding of submarine systems, derived from countless conversations with her father, allowed her to follow the experts' reasoning with comprehension that would have surprised them if they had realized the depth of her knowledge. Dr. Laura, Murphy noticed her daughter's intense focus on the engineering discussions and felt a mixture of pride and concern about Iris's exposure to such a serious crisis. "Sweetheart, this is pretty scary stuff for someone your age. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mom," Iris replied, her attention remaining focused on the technical displays that Professor Parker had spread across the laboratory bench. "I just keep thinking about what Dad taught me about backup systems. He said the most dangerous failures happen when all the safety systems try to fix the same problem at the same time." The observation, delivered with the straightforward logic that characterized childhood reasoning, caused Dr. Silver to look at Iris with renewed interest. Her comment demonstrated understanding of complex system dynamics that went far beyond casual exposure to technical concepts. "Iris, your father sounds like he knows quite a bit about engineering systems," Dr. Silver observed, his curiosity piqued by the child's sophisticated grasp of redundancy failures. "What kind of work does he do here at the research station?" The question created a moment of hesitation as Iris realized she had revealed more about her father's knowledge than was consistent with his public role as a marine research technician. Her 8-year-old mind struggled with the adult complexity of maintaining family secrets while wanting to help solve a problem that was threatening people's lives. "He helps with the equipment that monitors underwater conditions," Iris replied, carefully using the explanation that her father had taught her to give when people asked about his work. "He's really good at fixing things when they break." The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Amanda Foster, who burst into the laboratory with urgent news from her monitoring of emergency communications. "Dr. Silver, the rescue timeline has been accelerated. The submarine's emergency power is draining faster than initially calculated. They're estimating maybe 4 hours of life support remaining." The shortened timeline added new urgency to the crisis and increased the pressure on everyone involved in the rescue operation to find solutions quickly. Professor Parker began making phone calls to additional engineering experts, while Dr. Chang prepared to deploy underwater monitoring equipment that might provide more detailed information about the submarine's condition. As the morning progressed, toward noon, the emergency at Monterey Bay was escalating from a local crisis to a national emergency that would soon test every available resource and expertise. The solution that would ultimately save 130 lives was still hours away, waiting to be discovered by an 8-year-old girl whose father had taught her to see problems differently than the experts who were struggling with increasingly desperate attempts to apply conventional approaches to an unprecedented situation. The fog had completely lifted from Monterey Bay, revealing crystal-clear conditions that were perfect for rescue operations, but seemed to mock the invisible complexity of the crisis unfolding beneath the surface, where time was running out for sailors who had trusted their lives to systems that were failing in ways that no one yet understood. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the growing crowd of emergency responders as news of the submarine crisis spread throughout Monterey Bay's tight-knit community. Russell Hayes, the town mayor, arrived at the naval base perimeter with a convoy of local officials, volunteer firefighters, and concerned citizens who had abandoned their Tuesday routines to offer whatever assistance they could provide to the military personnel coordinating the rescue operation. "Captain Cooper, the entire community wants to help," Hayes announced, his voice carrying the determined spirit of a coastal town that had weathered countless storms and emergencies through collective effort. "We have commercial fishing boats with deep water experience, dive teams from the aquarium research programs, and medical facilities that can be reconfigured for emergency treatment if needed." Cooper appreciated the community support, but struggled with the reality that civilian resources, however well-intentioned, were inadequate for addressing the sophisticated technical challenges that had stumped the Navy's best submarine experts. "Mayor Hayes, We're grateful for the community's willingness to help, but this situation requires specialized submarine engineering expertise that frankly doesn't exist in sufficient quantity anywhere on the West Coast. The admission stung because it reflected a gap in emergency preparedness that could cost lives through no fault of the dedicated personnel who were working desperately to find solutions. Cooper had spent his military career believing that American naval technology was sophisticated enough to handle any conceivable emergency. But the USS Nautilus was proving that assumption dangerously wrong. Amparo Ramos arrived from her harbor, Budina carrying insulated containers of coffee and sandwiches for the emergency workers who had been functioning on adrenaline and determination for hours without proper nutrition. At 62, Amparo had fed 3 generations of Navy personnel and their families, earning a reputation as the unofficial mother figure for everyone stationed at Point Coral Naval Base. "Captain, these people need to eat if they're going to. Keep working," she declared, setting up an impromptu feeding station near the command center with the efficiency of someone who had organized community responses to previous emergencies. "I've got more food coming from restaurants all over town. Nobody's going hungry while our boys are trapped down there." The gesture of community support provided a brief moment of humanity in the midst of technical crisis, reminding everyone present that behind the engineering challenges and military procedures were real people whose families were counting on their safe return. Cooper accepted a cup of coffee gratefully while studying updated reports that continued to paint an increasingly desperate picture. Petty Officer Marcus Williams emerged from the Submarine Rescue Coordination Center with technical updates that reflected hours of futile attempts to establish remote control connections with the USS Nautilus. His expertise in electrical systems had been pushed to its limits by failures that seemed to defy every established principle of submarine engineering. Design. "Captain, we've attempted to activate emergency remote ballast control from surface vessels using low-frequency acoustic signals," Williams reported, his voice showing the strain of continuous problem-solving efforts that had produced no positive results. "The submarine's receivers are responding to our signals, but the ballast control systems aren't executing the commands. It's as if the electrical pathways between the control systems and the mechanical components have been completely severed." The technical explanation confirmed Cooper's growing fear that the USS Nautilus was trapped by failures so fundamental that they exceeded the capabilities of conventional rescue procedures. Standard submarine emergency protocols assumed that at least some electrical systems would remain functional, but the Nautilus appeared to be suffering from complete power distribution failure that left the crew with minimal life support and no ability to surface independently. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the Navy medical officer who had been monitoring the health status of the submarine crew through emergency communication systems, approached Cooper with reports that added medical urgency to the engineering challenges. Her 15 years of submarine medicine experience had prepared her for many emergency scenarios, but the psychological stress of prolonged entrapment was creating additional complications. "Captain, I'm receiving reports of anxiety-related medical issues among the younger crew members," Dr. Walsh informed him, her professional demeanor unable to completely mask her concern for the sailors who were facing an unprecedented crisis in the confined environment of a disabled submarine. "Commander Mitchell is maintaining excellent crew discipline, but the psychological pressure of being trapped underwater with failing life support systems is affecting morale and decision-making capabilities." The human dimension of the crisis added another layer of urgency to Cooper's decision-making process, as prolonged entrapment could lead to panic situations that would complicate rescue efforts even if technical solutions were eventually discovered. Military training prepared submarine crews for many emergency scenarios, but the current situation was testing the limits of even the most experienced personnel. At the research station, Leonard Murphy stood at the laboratory windows watching the emergency vessels through binoculars, while internally struggling with the knowledge that his expertise might be crucial for solving the crisis that was unfolding before his eyes. His years of designing submarine power management systems had taught him to think about electrical failures in ways that conventional troubleshooting approaches often missed. But revealing his knowledge would expose his family to the military, a tension he had spent 8 years avoiding. "Leonard, you've been watching that rescue operation all morning," Dr. Amanda Foster observed, noticing her colleague's unusual intensity and focus on the naval emergency. "You seem really concerned about the technical aspects. Do you think there's something the experts might be missing?" The question forced Leonard to confront the growing conflict between his personal desire for privacy and his professional responsibility to share knowledge that could save lives. His understanding of submarine electrical systems told him that the failure patterns being described were consistent with cascading power distribution problems that could be solved, but only if the rescuers understood the specific vulnerabilities of the Mark 7 emergency power management system that he had helped design. "Amanda, submarine power systems are incredibly complex," Leonard replied carefully, choosing his words to avoid revealing the extent of his specialized knowledge. "Sometimes the most sophisticated solutions aren't the right approaches for problems that have simple underlying causes." His response demonstrated technical understanding that went far beyond what Amanda expected from a marine research technician, raising questions about Leonard's background that she had never thought to ask. During their years of working together, the current crisis was revealing aspects of her colleague's knowledge and expertise that seemed inconsistent with his modest role at the research station. Iris had been listening to the adult conversations with growing understanding of the severity of the situation facing the trapped submarine crew, and her 8-year-old mind was processing the technical information through the lens of her father's teachings about systematic problem-solving approaches. The failure descriptions being discussed by the experts reminded her of explanations her father had given about why backup systems sometimes made problems worse instead of better. "Mom, can I ask Professor Parker a question about the submarine?" Iris inquired, her natural curiosity overcoming her usual shyness about approaching unfamiliar adults. Dr. Laura Murphy looked at her daughter with maternal concern about exposing an 8-year-old to such serious adult discussions, but she also recognized Iris's genuine interest in understanding complex technical problems. "Sweetheart, the professor is very busy trying to help solve this emergency. Maybe we should let the experts work." "But I think I understand why the backup systems aren't working," Iris persisted, her voice carrying the determined logic that her father had encouraged through years of patient teaching about how to approach engineering problems systematically. The statement caused everyone in the laboratory to stop their conversations and focus attention on the small girl who had just claimed to understand technical failures that were puzzling some of the nation's leading submarine experts. Professor Parker looked at Iris with surprise and growing curiosity about what an 8-year-old might have observed that experienced engineers had missed. "Iris, what do you think you understand about submarine backup systems?" Professor Parker asked, her tone respectful despite her skepticism that a child could contribute meaningfully to solving such complex technical problems. "Dad taught me that when you have lots of backup systems connected to the same control center, sometimes they fight each other instead of helping," Iris explained, using the simple language that her father had employed to make complex engineering concepts accessible to her young mind. "If the main computer that tells all the backup systems what to do gets confused, Then all the backups try to fix different problems at the same time, and that makes everything worse. The explanation demonstrated understanding of system integration challenges that impressed the adults who were listening, particularly because Iris had identified the potential for control system conflicts that could explain the USS Nautilus's cascading failures. Professor Parker realized that the child's observation addressed a vulnerability in submarine design that hadn't been adequately considered during the current crisis. Iris, that's a very sophisticated understanding of how complex systems can fail, Professor Parker acknowledged, her respect for the child's reasoning growing as she considered the implications of the observation. Where did your father learn about submarine control systems? The question created another moment of tension as Iris realized she was being asked to explain her father's knowledge in ways that might reveal more than her family wanted to share with strangers. Her 8-year-old understanding of adult privacy concerns wasn't sophisticated enough to navigate the complexities of maintaining her father's cover story while trying to help solve a life-threatening emergency. He reads lots of books about how things work, Iris replied, using the explanation that her parents had taught her for situations when people asked about her father's extensive technical knowledge. He likes to understand complicated machines. Dr. Silver, who had been quietly observing the exchange between Professor Parker and Iris, stepped forward with growing interest in the child's technical insights and her father's apparent expertise in submarine systems. The conversation was revealing knowledge and understanding that seemed far beyond what would be expected from a marine research technician, raising questions about Leonard Murphy's actual background and qualifications. Iris, do you think your father might be willing to share his thoughts about submarine power systems with our emergency response team? Dr. Silver asked, recognizing that unconventional expertise might be exactly what was needed to solve an unprecedented crisis. The suggestion that her father should become involved in the rescue operation created both excitement and anxiety in Iris's young mind, as she realized that helping the trapped sailors might require exposing the family secrets that her parents had worked so carefully to protect. Her father had taught her that sometimes doing the right thing required difficult choices, but she wasn't sure she understood all the consequences of inviting him to reveal his hidden knowledge. As the afternoon sun continued to beat down on Monterey Bay, time was running out for the USS Nautilus crew while the surface rescue operation struggled with technical challenges that conventional expertise couldn't solve. The solution that could save 130 lives was literally sitting in a marine research laboratory just miles from the emergency command center, contained in the knowledge of a retired submarine engineer who had successfully hidden his identity for 8 years, and an 8-year-old girl who was beginning to understand that her family's secrets might be the key to preventing an unprecedented maritime disaster. The clear afternoon light illuminated every detail of the rescue. Vessels that crowded Monterey Bay, but the most important elements of the developing solution remained hidden beneath layers of family privacy and technical complexity that would soon be exposed by the simple moral imperative of saving lives that hung in the balance beneath the deceptively calm waters. The emergency command center had grown into a maze of communication cables, monitoring equipment, and tactical displays as afternoon shadows lengthened across Naval Submarine Base Point Coral. Captain Thomas Reed, the submarine rescue specialist, who had flown in from Norfolk Naval Base, stood before a 3-dimensional holographic display showing the USS Nautilus's position while coordinating rescue assets that were proving inadequate for the unprecedented crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, we're facing a complete system failure that exceeds our current rescue capabilities, Reed announced to the assembled emergency coordinators, his 30 years of submarine rescue experience lending gravity to an admission that no one wanted to hear. The deep-sea rescue vessels from San Diego are still 4 hours out, and standard emergency procedures assume that submarines retain some autonomous capability to assist in their own rescue. Chief Petty Officer William Bull Anderson, whose submarine service dated back to the Cold War era, studied the acoustic data streaming from underwater monitoring equipment with the expression of someone who had never encountered anything comparable. In decades of submarine operations, his weathered hands traced the power fluctuation patterns on the display screens while his mind processed failure modes that challenged every assumption about submarine survivability. Captain Reed, I've been underwater in everything from nuclear attack subs to research vessels, and I've never seen electrical failures cascade through multiple independent systems like this, Anderson reported, his voice carrying the frustrated expertise of someone whose extensive experience was being challenged by an impossible situation. Either we're dealing with sabotage specifically designed to exploit unknown vulnerabilities, or these submarines have fundamental design flaws that somehow escape detection during years of testing and deployment. The possibility of design flaws affecting the entire submarine fleet added national security implications that extended far beyond the immediate rescue operation, raising questions about the reliability of America's underwater naval capabilities that could influence military policy for decades. Reed realized that solving the current crisis might be only the beginning of addressing systemic problems that threatened naval operations worldwide. Meanwhile, Leonard Murphy had made the decision that he could no longer remain a passive observer. While people died from problems he understood how to solve, the internal conflict between protecting his family's privacy and fulfilling his professional responsibility to save lives had resolved in favor of duty, despite the personal costs that would inevitably follow from revealing his true identity and expertise. "Laura, I need to go to the naval base," he told his wife quietly, speaking in a tone that she recognized from their early marriage when military obligations had required difficult decisions about family priorities. "There are things about this submarine emergency that I might be able to help with." Dr. Laura Murphy looked at her husband with understanding and concern, recognizing the signs that indicated Leonard was preparing to abandon the anonymity they had worked so hard to maintain for their daughter's sake. She had always known this moment might come when circumstances would force him to choose between personal security and professional obligation. "Leonard, are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice carrying years of shared understanding about why they had left military life behind and the consequences of returning to that world. "Once you reveal who you are, there's no going back to our quiet life here." "I know," Leonard replied, his decision already made despite the personal costs involved. "But there are 130 people whose families deserve to have them come home safely, and I might be the only person in the area who understands why their rescue is failing." Iris had been listening to her parents' conversation with the acute awareness that 8-year-olds possessed for detecting adult tension and conflict, and she realized that her father was preparing to make sacrifices that would change their family's life permanently. Her young mind processed the implications with wisdom beyond her years, understanding that sometimes helping others required giving up things that were important to you. "Dad, if you help save the submarine people, will we have to move away from here?" she asked, her question cutting directly to the heart of her family's dilemma with the straightforward logic that characterized childhood reasoning. Leonard knelt down to his daughter's eye level, recognizing that she deserved an honest answer about how their lives might change as a result of his decision to become involved in the rescue operation. "Iris, I don't know what will happen after I help with the submarine, but I do know that we can't let people die when we might be able to save them." The moral clarity of his explanation resonated with the values that Leonard and Laura had taught. their daughter throughout her life, emphasizing that doing the right thing sometimes required personal sacrifice. Iris nodded with the serious expression of someone who understood that important decisions often involved difficult trade-offs. "I want to come with you," Iris announced, her voice carrying the determined spirit that her father had encouraged. Through years of teaching her to think independently and take responsibility for her actions. "I understand submarine systems too, and maybe I can help explain things in ways that are easier for people to understand." The suggestion that an 8-year-old girl should participate in a military emergency operation would normally be dismissed without consideration, but Leonard recognized that Iris's natural ability to communicate complex technical concepts in simple terms might actually be valuable for helping experts understand problems they were approaching with excessive sophistication. "Sweetheart, this is very serious adult work that might be dangerous," Laura protested, her maternal instincts conflicting with her recognition that Iris had demonstrated genuine understanding of the technical issues involved in the submarine. "Your crisis, Mum. I'm not going to do anything dangerous," Iris replied with the patient logic she used when explaining obvious facts to adults who seemed to be missing simple points. "I'm just going to tell them what Dad taught me about why backup systems sometimes make problems worse instead of better." As the Murphy family prepared to leave for the naval base, Dr. Silver had already contacted Captain Cooper to inform him that one of the research station personnel might have relevant expertise for addressing the submarine emergency. The phone call was deliberately vague about Leonard's background, leaving the extent of his knowledge unclear while ensuring that military officials would be receptive to consulting with civilian experts. "Captain Cooper, we have a researcher here who has extensive knowledge of submarine electrical systems," Dr. Silver reported, choosing his words carefully to avoid making specific claims about Leonard's qualifications, while ensuring that the military would take his potential contributions seriously. He's been following the technical reports about the USS Nautilus, and he believes he might understand why conventional rescue approaches aren't working. Cooper's response reflected the desperation of someone who had exhausted conventional options and was willing to consider any possibility that might save lives. "Dr. Silva, at this point, I'm authorized to consult with anyone who might have relevant expertise. Bring him over immediately." The authorization to bring Leonard to the Emergency Command Center represented a turning point in the crisis, as military officials prepared to seek solutions from outside their normal channels of expertise. Cooper had reached the conclusion that saving the submarine crew might require abandoning standard procedures in favor of creative approaches that conventional military thinking hadn't anticipated. As the Murphy family drove toward Naval Submarine Base Point Coral, Leonard felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and apprehension that had characterized his years of military service when approaching complex technical challenges that could affect many lives. His expertise in submarine power management systems might be exactly what was needed to solve the USS Nautilus crisis. But using that knowledge would inevitably expose him to renewed military interest that could disrupt the peaceful life he had built for his family. "Dad, are you nervous about talking to the military people?" Iris asked from the back seat, her perceptive question reflecting her awareness that this emergency was forcing her father to confront aspects of his past that he had deliberately avoided for 8 years. "A little nervous," Leonard admitted honestly, recognizing that his daughter deserved truthful answers about the emotional complexity of their situation. "But mostly, I'm focused on helping solve the problem, so those sailors can go home to their families safely." Diana Foster had established a media staging area outside the naval base perimeter, where she was preparing to broadcast live updates about the developing rescue operation. her reporter's instincts telling her that the crisis was building toward a dramatic resolution that would capture national attention. The arrival of additional experts and rescue equipment suggested that significant developments were imminent, though she had no way of knowing that the most important expertise was approaching the base in the form of a retired submarine engineer and his 8-year-old daughter. This is Diana Foster reporting live from Monterey Bay, where military officials are working desperately to rescue more than 100 sailors trapped aboard a disabled submarine, she announced to her television audience, gesturing toward the collection of emergency vessels that continued to maintain position above the USS Nautilus. Sources indicate that conventional rescue procedures have been unsuccessful, and military commanders are now seeking assistance from civilian experts who might understand technical failures that have stumped Navy specialists. The broadcast was reaching audiences throughout California and beyond, transforming a local emergency into a national news story that would soon focus attention on the Murphy family's role in resolving the crisis. Leonard realized that their involvement in the rescue operation would inevitably become public knowledge, ending forever the anonymity they had maintained for 8 years. As their car approached the naval base security checkpoint, Leonard handed his identification to the guard while mentally preparing to reveal his true background to military officials, who would soon discover that the quiet marine research technician was actually Captain Leonard Wave Murphy, whose innovations in submarine power management had influenced naval engineering for more than a decade before his unexpected retirement to civilian life. The guard's routine inspection of Leonard's identification would be the first step in a process that would transform him from anonymous researcher to the central figure in the most dramatic submarine rescue in naval history, orchestrated not by admirals or engineering experts, but by a father and daughter whose shared understanding of complex systems would prove crucial for saving lives when conventional expertise had failed. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent toward the Pacific horizon as the Murphy family prepared to enter a world of military protocol and technical crisis that would test Leonard's knowledge, challenge Iris's courage, and ultimately force them to choose between personal privacy and public service in ways that would define their family's future for years to come. The security checkpoint at Naval Submarine Base Point Coral erupted into controlled chaos when the U.S. Guard's routine database check revealed that Leonard Murphy's identification was flagged with classified military service records that immediately triggered notifications to base security and command personnel. Within minutes of their arrival, the Murphy family found themselves escorted not to the public consultation area that Leonard had expected, but directly to the emergency command center, where Captain Cooper was coordinating increasingly desperate rescue efforts. Mr. Murphy, or should I say Captain Murphy, Cooper began, his voice carrying a mixture of respect and urgent relief as he studied Leonard's service record on his secure tablet. Your expertise in submarine power management systems makes you exactly the person we need right now. I'm hoping you can explain why the USS Nautilus is experiencing cascading electrical failures that our best engineers can't understand. Leonard felt the familiar weight of military responsibility settling on his shoulders as he surveyed the emergency command center's sophisticated monitoring equipment and tactical displays that showed the submarine's position and the status of rescue assets converging on Monterey Bay. His years of designing power management systems had prepared him for exactly this type of crisis, but he had hoped never to face such situations again. Captain Cooper, I need to see the specific failure patterns and power distribution diagnostics before I can offer meaningful analysis, Leonard replied, his professional demeanor automatically reasserting itself as he approached the technical displays that contained crucial information about the submarine's condition. The Mark 7 emergency power management system has several potential vulnerability points that might not be obvious to technicians who weren't involved in the original design process. Master Chief Harrison stepped forward with data tablets and acoustic monitoring equipment that contained hours of diagnostic information collected from the USS Nautilus, his expression showing hope for the first time since the crisis had begun. Captain Murphy, we've documented every electrical fluctuation and system response since the initial power failure. The patterns are unlike anything in our experience with submarine emergencies. As Leonard began studying the technical data, Iris stood quietly beside her father while observing the intense adult activity that surrounded them. The emergency command center was overwhelming for an 8-year-old, filled with sophisticated equipment, urgent conversations, and the palpable stress of people working to save lives under extreme pressure. Despite her young age, she recognized that her father was transitioning back into the military role he had abandoned to provide her with a normal childhood. Professor Parker approached the family group with obvious relief and professional excitement about finally having access to expertise that might explain the submarine's unprecedented failures. Captain Murphy, I've been analyzing these power distribution anomalies for hours without finding logical explanations for why multiple independent backup systems would interfere with each other in the ways we're observing. Leonard accepted the technical displays from Professor Parker while his mind automatically shifted into the systematic analysis mode that had characterized his years of solving complex submarine engineering problems. The failure patterns were immediately familiar to him as symptoms of a design vulnerability that he had identified and recommended addressing during the Mark 7 system's development, but his suggestions had been overruled by cost considerations and schedule pressures. Professor Parker, what you're seeing is a cascade failure triggered by excessive power demand on the emergency distribution network, Leonard explained, pointing to specific data patterns that revealed the underlying problem. When the primary power system failed, all backup systems activated simultaneously and began competing for limited electrical capacity, creating feedback loops that are progressively disabling each backup as it comes online. The explanation provided the first coherent analysis of the submarine's condition that anyone had offered since the crisis began, but it also revealed the magnitude of the design flaw that was threatening the USS Nautilus crew. Leonard's understanding of the system's vulnerabilities came from his direct involvement in identifying problems that had been ignored during the development process. Captain Murphy, are you saying this failure was predictable? Captain Cooper asked, his voice carrying the controlled anger of someone realizing that a preventable design flaw was threatening the lives of his personnel. I identified this potential vulnerability during the system's development and recommended design modifications to prevent cascade failures, but my recommendations were rejected due to cost and schedule constraints, Leonard replied, his honest answer carrying implications that would eventually affect military procurement policies and congressional oversight of naval engineering projects. Lieutenant Colonel Brooks, who had been monitoring the conversation from the Pentagon's perspective, stepped forward with questions that addressed the broader implications of Leonard's revelation about known design vulnerabilities. Captain Murphy, do you have documentation of your recommendations and the reasons they were rejected? Colonel, I have complete technical documentation of the vulnerability analysis and recommended modifications in my personal files, Leonard replied, recognizing that his involvement in the rescue operation was inevitably leading to broader investigations of military engineering decisions. But right now, my priority is helping you save the submarine crew. The policy discussions can wait until after we've resolved the immediate crisis. Iris had been listening to her father's technical explanations with growing understanding of why he had been reluctant to remain involved in military engineering projects, where cost considerations could override safety recommendations. Her 8-year-old mind processed the adult complexity of situations where people in authority positions made decisions that put other people at risk for reasons that had nothing to do with keeping people safe. "Dad, can you fix the submarines?" "A power problem," she asked quietly, her question cutting through the complex technical and political discussions to focus on the fundamental issue of saving lives. "I think so, sweetheart," Leonard replied, his attention turning to the practical challenge of implementing solutions under emergency conditions. "But it's going to require some creative approaches that the rescue teams haven't tried yet." Chief Warrant Officer O'Brien, who had been coordinating communication with the submarine crew, approached Leonard with updated reports about the USS Nautilus's deteriorating condition. "Captain Murphy, Commander Mitchell reports that emergency life support systems are now experiencing intermittent failures and crew more." Captain Cooper immediately authorized Leonard's request for direct communication with the submarine, recognizing that conventional command structures were less important than utilizing available expertise to save lives. "Captain Murphy, you have full authorization to coordinate directly with the submarine crew for any technical procedures you believe will resolve this crisis." As Leonard prepared to guide the USS Nautilus crew through complex power system reset procedures, Iris realized that her father was transforming back into the military engineer whose expertise had shaped submarine technology before she was born. The quiet man who had taught her about marine life and mechanical systems was revealing himself to be someone whose knowledge and experience extended far beyond anything she had previously understood about his background. "Mom, Dad's different when he's doing military work," Iris observed to her mother, her perceptive comment reflecting her awareness that her father was accessing professional capabilities that he had deliberately suppressed during their civilian life. Dr. Laura Murphy nodded with understanding born from years of marriage to someone whose military service had shaped his character in ways that civilian life couldn't completely erase. "Your father is very good at solving complicated problems that can help a lot of people, but that kind of work comes with responsibilities and pressures that we hope to avoid by living quietly here in Monterey Bay." The Emergency Command Center had become focused on Leonard's systematic approach to resolving the submarine's power distribution problems, with military and civilian experts following his lead as he prepared to guide the USS Nautilus crew through procedures that could either save their lives or worsen their already desperate situation. The success of Leonard's proposed solution would determine not only the fate of 130 sailors, but also whether his family's 8 years of peaceful anonymity had been permanently sacrificed for the greater good. Diana Foster, reporting from outside the naval base perimeter, was documenting the arrival of additional emergency equipment and personnel while remaining unaware that the crisis was being addressed by a retired submarine engineer whose expertise could provide the breakthrough that rescue coordinators had been seeking. Military officials continued to work frantically to establish contact with the disabled submarine, and sources indicate that civilian consultants with specialized knowledge are now assisting with the rescue operation. As afternoon shadows continued to lengthen across Monterey Bay, Leonard Murphy prepared to demonstrate whether 8 years of civilian life had diminished his ability to solve the kind of complex engineering crisis that had once defined his military career, while his 8-year-old daughter watched her father reclaim an identity that would inevitably change their family's future in ways that none of them could fully anticipate. The clear afternoon light illuminated every detail of the rescue operation that had captured national attention, But the most critical moments were about to unfold in the technical complexity of submarine power systems, where Leonard's expertise would either prove sufficient to save lives or inadequate to prevent the most tragic submarine disaster in modern naval history. The emergency communication system crackled to life as Leonard established direct contact with Commander Mitchell aboard the USS Nautilus, his voice carrying across the 90 feet of water that separated the submarine crew from their potential salvation. The acoustic transmission quality was poor, requiring precise articulation and careful timing to ensure that complex technical instructions could be understood and executed correctly under the extreme stress conditions that existed within the disabled vessel. Commander Mitchell, this is Captain Leonard Murphy coordinating surface rescue operations, Leonard announced, his military bearing automatically reasserting itself as he assumed responsibility for guiding the submarine crew through procedures that could either save their lives or exhaust their remaining emergency power. I'm going to walk your electrical team through a controlled power system reset that should resolve the cascade failures, preventing your emergency ascent. Commander Mitchell's response carried the relief of someone who had spent hours facing an impossible situation without viable solutions. But it also reflected the skepticism of an experienced submarine officer who understood the risks involved in experimental procedures under emergency conditions. Captain Murphy, we've attempted multiple power reset sequences without success. What makes you believe a different approach will work when standard emergency procedures have failed? The question forced Leonard to explain technical concepts through poor quality acoustic communication while maintaining the confidence necessary to convince a submarine crew to trust their lives to his expertise. His understanding of the Mark VII system's vulnerabilities gave him knowledge that wasn't available to the submarine crew. But communicating that knowledge effectively required skills he hadn't used since leaving military service 8 years ago. Commander, the cascade failures you're experiencing result from backup systems competing for insufficient electrical capacity rather than component malfunctions, Leonard explained, speaking slowly and clearly to ensure that his instructions could be understood despite the communication limitations. The reset sequence I'm proposing will bring backup systems online individually rather than simultaneously, preventing the power conflicts that are disabling each system as it activates. Chief Petty Officer Campos, working at her electrical control, stationed 90 feet underwater, began implementing Leonard's instructions while fighting the psychological pressure of working in an environment where every decision could affect the survival of her fellow crew members. Her 15 years of submarine electrical experience had never prepared her for a situation where conventional training was inadequate for addressing catastrophic system failures. Surface control. We're beginning the individual backup system activation sequence, Campos reported. Her voice transmitted through emergency acoustic systems that provided the only reliable communication link between the submarine and surface rescue coordination. Backup Generator 1 is responding normally to startup commands. Leonard monitored the electrical readings being transmitted from the submarine while coordinating with Professor Parker and Dr. Chang, who were analyzing the power distribution patterns in real time to verify that his proposed solution was producing the expected results. The success of the reset procedure depended on precise timing and coordination between multiple backup systems that had been fighting each other for hours. "Excellent, Chief Campos," Leonard responded, his voice carrying the calm authority that had characterized his years of guiding submarine crews through complex technical procedures. "Now wait 60 seconds for the first backup system to stabilize before activating Backup Generator 2. The delay is crucial for preventing the power conflicts that caused the original cascade failure." Iris stood beside her father, watching his Transformation from quiet research technician to submarine rescue coordinator, her 8-year-old mind struggling to reconcile the man she had known all her life with the confident military engineer who was taking command of a life-threatening emergency. The sophisticated technical knowledge that her father was demonstrating far exceeded anything she had observed during their conversations about marine equipment and submarine systems. "Dad, how do you know exactly what to tell them to do?" Iris asked quietly, her question reflecting her growing awareness that her father's expertise extended far beyond the casual mechanical knowledge that had characterized their discussions about how complex systems worked. "Sweetheart, I helped design the power systems they're using, so I understand how they're supposed to work and what can go wrong with them," Leonard replied honestly, recognizing that his daughter deserved truthful explanations about his background and the source of his specialized knowledge. Admiral Beverly Marine, who had been monitoring the rescue operation from Pacific Fleet headquarters, contacted Captain Cooper directly to express both relief and concern about the involvement of retired personnel in active submarine emergency procedures. Her voice carried the authority of someone responsible for coordinating naval operations across the entire Pacific region while managing political pressures from the highest levels of government. "Captain Cooper, I'm gratified that you've located expertise capable of addressing this crisis, but I need to understand why a retired submarine engineer with classified system knowledge was working as a civilian researcher without maintaining security clearances," Admiral Marine stated, her questions addressing institutional security concerns that extended beyond the immediate rescue operation. Cooper recognized that Admiral Marine's inquiry represented the beginning of investigations that would examine how Leonard's expertise had remained unrecognized for 8 years while he worked in a position that provided no apparent benefit to naval operations. Admiral Captain Murphy's civilian employment appears to have been a personal choice rather than a security-related assignment, but I recommend postponing detailed personnel investigations until after we've successfully completed the submarine rescue. The response satisfied Admiral Marine's immediate concerns, while acknowledging that Leonard's situation would inevitably become the subject of extensive review by naval intelligence and personnel security offices. His involvement in resolving the USS Nautilus crisis had permanently ended his ability to maintain anonymity while raising questions about institutional policies governing retired personnel with classified knowledge. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, the Navy Public Affairs officer responsible for managing media coverage of the emergency, approached Captain Cooper with reports that national news organizations were beginning to focus attention on the involvement of civilian experts in submarine rescue operations. "Captain, we're receiving inquiries from major networks about the technical aspects of the rescue operation and the qualifications of personnel coordinating the emergency response." The media attention represented another complication for Leonard's family, as reporters would inevitably investigate the background of civilian consultants who had played crucial roles in resolving military emergencies. Cooper realized that protecting the Murphy family's privacy was becoming impossible as the rescue operation attracted national attention and official scrutiny. Dr. Laura Murphy had been observing her husband's return to military service with mixed emotions, feeling proud of his expertise while recognizing that their quiet life in Monterey Bay was ending permanently. Her years of marriage to a submarine engineer had taught her to understand the psychological demands of military service and the personal costs involved in accepting responsibility for other people's lives under extreme circumstances. "Leonard, you're completely focused on the rescue operation," she observed, her comment reflecting her recognition that her husband was accessing professional capabilities that civilian life had allowed him to suppress but never eliminate. "This is who you really are, isn't it, Laura? I've been this person all along," Leonard replied, without taking his attention from the submarine communication system. "I just hoped I'd never have to use these skills again because of what they cost our family in terms of privacy and normal life." Meanwhile, aboard the USS Nautilus, the controlled power system reset was producing the first positive results that the crew had experienced since the original emergency began. Backup Generator 2 had activated successfully without triggering. The power conflicts that had disabled previous attempts to restore electrical systems, providing hope that the submarine might finally regain enough power to execute emergency ascent procedures. "Surface control, Backup Generator 2 is online and stable," Commander Mitchell reported, his voice carrying cautious optimism as electrical systems began functioning normally for the first time in hours. "We're seeing restored power to ballast, control systems, and propulsion management. Request permission to begin emergency ascent procedures." Leonard consulted with the Surface Rescue Coordination Team before authorizing the submarine's emergency ascent, recognizing that premature surfacing could still endanger the rescue operation if insufficient power remained to control the ascent properly. "Commander Mitchell, monitor your power distribution carefully during ascent preparation. If you experience any power fluctuations, abort the ascent immediately and wait for additional backup systems to stabilize." Captain Thomas Reed, who had been coordinating surface rescue assets, positioned emergency vessels to provide assistance during the submarine's ascent, while ensuring that civilian boat traffic remained clear of the area where the USS Nautilus would break the surface. His years of submarine rescue experience told him that successful power restoration didn't guarantee safe surfacing, as numerous additional complications could arise during emergency ascent procedures. Petty Officer Williams, monitoring electrical systems from the Surface Rescue Coordination Center, confirmed that acoustic telemetry from the submarine indicated continuing improvement in power distribution and system functionality. "Captain Murphy, we're receiving normal operational readings from submarine electrical systems for the first time since the emergency began. Your reset procedure appears to have resolved the cascade failure completely." Iris watched the adult, excitement and relief that surrounded her father's successful resolution of the submarine crisis, while beginning to understand that her family's involvement in this emergency would have consequences that extended far beyond saving the lives of the USS Nautilus crew. The media attention, military recognition, and official investigations that would inevitably follow meant that their quiet life as a normal family was ending permanently. "Mom, will Dad have to go back to being in the military now?" Iris asked, her question reflecting her 8-year-old understanding that helping people sometimes required sacrifices that changed your life in ways you couldn't predict or control. Dr. Laura Murphy looked at her daughter with maternal honesty about the uncertainty they faced regarding their family's future. "I don't know, sweetheart. Your father saved a lot of people today, and sometimes when you do something that important, other people want you to keep helping them with similar problems." As the USS Nautilus prepared for emergency ascent under Leonard's continued guidance, the Murphy family stood together in the Emergency Command Center, knowing that their 8 years of peaceful anonymity in Monterey Bay had been permanently sacrificed for the greater good of saving 130 lives, while facing an uncertain future that would be shaped by the consequences of Leonard's decision to reveal his expertise when it was needed most. The surface of Monterey Bay erupted in a controlled explosion of foam and spray as the USS Nautilus broke through 90 feet of water with the mechanical precision of a vessel whose power systems were finally functioning as designed. Emergency rescue boats maintained safe distances while positioning themselves to provide immediate assistance if the submarine's ascent created unexpected complications. But Leonard's systematic approach to resolving the cascade failures had restored enough electrical capability to execute normal emergency surfacing procedures. Surface, surface, surface. Commander Mitchell's voice crackled through the communication system as the submarine's conning tower emerged into afternoon sunlight for the first time since the crisis began, followed by the massive bulk of the vessel's hull that displaced thousands of gallons of seawater in a demonstration of successful engineering and seamless rescue coordination. Captain Cooper felt the weight of command responsibility lifting from his shoulders as he watched the USS Nautilus complete its emergency ascent without incident. But his relief was tempered by recognition that the successful rescue had been achieved through civilian expertise rather than military resources. The implications for naval emergency preparedness and institutional accountability would require extensive review and policy modifications. All rescue vessels, this is Cooper. Submarine has successfully surfaced with all crew accounted for. Begin standard emergency medical evaluation and debriefing procedures, Cooper announced through the tactical communication network that connected every element of the rescue operation. Iris pressed against the emergency command center windows to watch the submarine's dramatic appearance above water. Her 8-year-old excitement about witnessing such an impressive mechanical achievement competing with her growing awareness that her father's role in the rescue was transforming their family's quiet life into something completely different. The massive vessel that her father had helped save represented both a successful rescue and the end of their anonymity. "Dad, it's huge!" Iris exclaimed, her natural childhood wonder at seeing a real submarine surface overcoming the adult concerns about privacy and family disruption that had dominated recent conversations. "How many people are inside?" 130 sailors who get to go home to their families tonight because you helped me understand how to explain the power system problems, Leonard replied, his voice carrying parental pride mixed with recognition that his daughter had contributed meaningfully to solving a crisis that had challenged experienced engineers. Diana Foster, positioned with her cameraman at the media staging area, captured dramatic footage of the submarine's emergency, surfacing while preparing to broadcast live reports about the successful rescue operation to national television audiences. Her reporter's instincts told her that the story involved more than routine military emergency procedures, particularly given the involvement of civilian consultants whose expertise had apparently been crucial for resolving the crisis. This is Diana Foster reporting live from Monterey Bay, where we've just witnessed the successful emergency surfacing of the USS Nautilus after more than 6 hours underwater with complete power system failure, she announced to her television audience, gesturing toward the submarine that was now visible on the surface surrounded by rescue vessels. Sources indicate that civilian experts played a crucial role in coordinating the rescue operation when conventional military procedures proved inadequate for addressing unprecedented technical failures. The broadcast was reaching millions of viewers throughout California and across the country, transforming Leonard's involvement in the rescue from local assistance to national recognition that would inevitably attract attention from military officials, congressional oversight committees, and media organizations interested in investigating how a retired submarine engineer had remained unrecognized while working in civilian research positions. Master Chief Harrison coordinated the medical evaluation teams that were preparing to board the USS Nautilus and assess the physical and psychological condition of crew members who had endured hours of life-threatening emergency conditions in the confined environment of a disabled submarine. His 30 years of submarine service had taught him to understand the stress factors that affected crews during extended emergencies. Captain Cooper, initial reports from the submarine indicate no serious medical emergencies among the crew, but several younger sailors are showing signs of anxiety and stress-related symptoms that will require psychological evaluation and support, Harrison reported, his assessment reflecting the human cost of the crisis that extended beyond the mechanical failures that had threatened the vessel. Professor Parker approached Leonard with professional recognition of his expertise and growing curiosity about how someone with his advanced knowledge of submarine systems had been working anonymously in marine research for 8 years without anyone recognizing his qualifications. Captain Murphy, your understanding of the Mark 7 power management system was more detailed than anything available in current technical documentation. How long were you involved in developing those systems? The question forced Leonard to confront the professional relationships and recognition that he had deliberately avoided since retiring from military service, but his successful resolution of the submarine crisis had made it impossible to maintain the anonymity that had protected his family's privacy. Professor, I was the lead engineer for the Mark 7 development project from initial design through deployment testing. My retirement 8 years ago was motivated by disagreements about safety recommendations that were rejected for budgetary reasons. The revelation that Leonard had been the primary architect of the submarine power systems that had failed so catastrophically added new dimensions to the institutional accountability questions that would inevitably arise from congressional and military investigations of the crisis. His documentation of rejected safety recommendations could influence naval procurement policies and engineering oversight procedures for years to come. Lieutenant Colonel Brooks, who had been monitoring the rescue operation from the Pentagon's perspective, contacted Captain Cooper with authorization for a comprehensive debriefing session that would examine every aspect of the emergency response, including the technical decisions that had enabled the successful rescue and the institutional failures that had created the crisis. Captain Cooper, the Secretary of the Navy, is ordering immediate investigation of the circumstances that led to this emergency and the involvement of retired personnel whose expertise was apparently essential for resolving problems that active duty personnel couldn't address. Cooper recognized that his role in the successful rescue was being overshadowed by larger questions about military preparedness and institutional accountability that would affect his career and the careers of everyone involved in the emergency. Response: Colonel Brooks, I recommend that any investigations focus on improving future emergency preparedness rather than assigning blame for decisions that were made under extreme time pressure with limited information. Dr. Joaquin Silva approached the Murphy family with professional respect for Leonard's contribution to the rescue operation and personal concern for the family's well-being as they faced the inevitable consequences of Leonard's decision to reveal his expertise. Captain Murphy, the entire research station staff wants to thank you for your courage in stepping forward when lives were at stake. But we also recognize that your involvement in this rescue will probably change your employment situation with us. The observation addressed practical concerns about Leonard's continued employment at the Marine Research Station, now that his military background and classified expertise had become public knowledge. His role as a quiet technician was no longer viable, given the attention and official interest that would inevitably follow from his central role in resolving the submarine emergency. Dr. Silva, I've enjoyed my 8 years at the research station, and I appreciate the opportunity you provided for me to work in marine science while raising my daughter in a peaceful environment, Leonard replied honestly, recognizing that his civilian career was ending regardless of his personal preferences about maintaining privacy and family normalcy. Seaman Jake Thompson, one of the younger crew members from the USS Nautilus, was among the first sailors to be evacuated from the submarine for medical evaluation, his pale complexion and shaky demeanor reflecting the psychological stress of spending hours trapped underwater while electrical systems failed around him. His condition represented the human cost of the crisis that had been resolved through Leonard's expertise. "I thought we were going to die down there," Thompson told the medical personnel who were evaluating his condition, his honest admission, reflecting the terror that had gripped the younger crew members as they realized that conventional emergency procedures weren't working and their situation was becoming increasingly desperate. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who was coordinating medical support for the submarine crew, recognized that several sailors would require psychological counseling to address the trauma of their experience. But she also felt professional satisfaction that Leonard's technical intervention had prevented what could have been the most tragic submarine disaster in modern naval history. "Captain Murphy, your expertise saved 130 lives today," Dr. Walsh told Leonard directly, her acknowledgement carrying the gratitude of someone who understood the human significance of his decision to reveal his background and accept responsibility for guiding the rescue operation. Iris observed the adult expressions of gratitude and professional recognition that surrounded her father, while beginning to understand that his actions had affected many families beyond their own. The sailors who were being evacuated from the submarine had children and spouses who would have been devastated by the loss of their loved ones if the rescue had failed. "Dad, all those sailors have families who were worried about them, don't they?" Iris asked, her question reflecting her growing awareness that the submarine crisis had affected many people beyond the crew members who had been trapped underwater. "That's right, sweetheart," Leonard replied, his voice carrying the satisfaction that came from using his knowledge to help others despite the personal costs involved. "Every person we helped save today has family members who were praying for their safe return." As the afternoon sun continued its descent toward the Pacific horizon, the Murphy family stood together, watching the successful completion of the most dramatic submarine rescue in naval history, knowing that their quiet life in Monterey Bay had been permanently transformed by Leonard's decision to step forward when his expertise was needed most. The consequences of their involvement in the rescue would continue to unfold for months and years to come, but they faced an uncertain future with the knowledge that they had chosen service over privacy when lives hung in the balance. The clear afternoon light illuminated every detail of the rescue vessels that surrounded the USS Nautilus. But the most important changes resulting from the day's events were invisible ones that would reshape the Murphy family's life and Leonard's relationship with the military service that he had never truly left behind, despite 8 years of deliberately civilian existence in the peaceful coastal community that had provided sanctuary for his family until duty called him back to serve others in their moment of greatest need. 3 days after the USS Nautilus rescue, the Murphy family found themselves sitting in the conference room of Pacific Fleet headquarters, facing a panel of military officials whose questions would determine Leonard's future relationship with the Navy and his family's long-term security. Admiral Beverly Marine presided over the formal inquiry, with the authority of someone responsible for ensuring that the lessons learned from the submarine crisis would improve naval operations throughout the Pacific region. "Captain Murphy, your documentation of safety recommendations that were rejected during the Mark 7 development process has prompted a comprehensive review of naval engineering procurement procedures," Admiral Marine announced, her voice carrying the weight of institutional change that would affect submarine design and testing protocols for decades to come. "The Secretary of the Navy has authorized me to offer you reinstatement to active duty with immediate promotion to full captain and Assignment as Director of Submarine Safety Systems. The offer represented everything that Leonard had walked away from 8 years earlier, combined with recognition and authority that exceeded his previous military position. But accepting would require sacrificing the family life that had motivated his original retirement from naval service. Iris sat quietly beside her parents, listening to adult discussions about career opportunities that could separate her father from their family for months at a time. "Admiral, I'm honored by the offer, but my decision to retire was motivated by family considerations that remain my primary concern," Leonard replied, his voice carrying the respectful firmness of someone whose priorities had been shaped by 8 years of civilian family life. "I have an 8-year-old daughter whose stability and education are more important to me than any professional advancement." Admiral Marine studied Leonard's service record while considering alternatives that might utilize his expertise without requiring traditional military deployment schedules. "Captain Murphy, would you consider a consulting arrangement that would allow you to maintain civilian residence here in Monterey Bay while providing technical oversight for submarine safety programs? The Navy needs your knowledge, but we also recognize the personal sacrifices you've already made in service to your country." The proposed compromise offered possibilities for Leonard to contribute his expertise while preserving his family's stability. But Iris noticed the tension in her mother's expression as she processed the implications of any ongoing military involvement that would bring renewed security scrutiny and public attention to their previously private lives. Dr. Laura Murphy had spent the past 3 days fielding phone calls from reporters, military personnel, and academic institutions that had learned about her husband's background and wanted to discuss research collaborations, interview requests, and employment opportunities that would capitalize on Leonard's newfound recognition as the submarine engineer who had saved 130 lives. "Admiral Marine, any ongoing military involvement will continue to attract media attention and official scrutiny that affects our daughter's normal childhood development," Laura stated, her maternal advocacy clearly outlining the family's concerns about privacy and security that extended beyond Leonard's professional considerations. Professor Judith Parker, who had been invited to participate in the inquiry as a civilian expert witness, offered perspectives about alternative approaches to utilizing Leonard's expertise that might address both naval needs and family concerns. "Admiral, perhaps Captain Murphy could contribute to submarine safety programs through academic consultation and technical review processes that wouldn't require security clearances or military status." The suggestion opened possibilities for Leonard to share his knowledge through university partnerships and civilian research programs that could influence naval engineering without subjecting his family to the security restrictions and public attention that accompanied active military service. However, Admiral Marine's response indicated that certain aspects of submarine technology required classified consultation that couldn't be managed through purely academic channels. "Professor Parker, while academic consultation has value, Captain, Murphy's knowledge of current submarine vulnerabilities and defensive capabilities requires classified collaboration that can only be managed through formal military or government consulting arrangements," Admiral Marine explained, her analysis highlighting the national security dimensions that complicated any simple resolution of Leonard's employment situation. Meanwhile, Iris was struggling with 8-year-old confusion about why her father's decision to help people had created so many complicated adult problems about jobs, security clearances, and family privacy. Her understanding of right and wrong told her that saving people's lives was obviously the correct choice, but the consequences seemed to be making her parents worried and stressed in ways that didn't make sense to her young mind. "Dad, why are all these adults making helping people so complicated?" Iris asked quietly, her question cutting through the bureaucratic and political discussions to focus on the fundamental moral issues that had motivated Leonard's original decision to reveal his expertise. "Sweetheart, sometimes when you have special knowledge that can help solve important problems, other people want to make sure you keep using that knowledge to help with similar problems in the future," Leonard explained, attempting to provide his daughter with an age-appropriate understanding of the institutional pressures that were shaping their family's options. Lieutenant Colonel Brooks, representing the Pentagon's perspective on Leonard's situation, introduced additional complexity by outlining congressional interest in Leonard's documentation of rejected safety recommendations and the potential for his testimony to influence military procurement oversight and engineering accountability procedures. "Captain Murphy, the House Armed Services Committee has expressed interest in your testimony regarding safety recommendations that were rejected for budgetary reasons during submarine development programs," Brooks announced, her statement indicating that Leonard's involvement in the USS Nautilus rescue had attracted political attention that extended far beyond military personnel decisions. The possibility of congressional testimony added public and political dimensions to Leonard's situation that would make it impossible for his family to return to their previous anonymity, regardless of his decisions about future military involvement. His documentation of engineering safety issues had become evidence in broader investigations of defense procurement and oversight procedures. Captain Cooper, who had traveled from Monterey Bay to participate in the inquiry, offered perspectives based on his direct experience with the submarine rescue operation and his observations of Leonard's expertise under emergency conditions. Admiral Marine, Captain Murphy's technical knowledge and crisis management capabilities exceeded anything available through our normal military channels. His civilian employment provided no indication of his qualifications, which suggests our personnel tracking systems may be missing other retired experts whose knowledge could be valuable during emergencies. The observation prompted discussion about institutional procedures for maintaining contact with retired personnel whose expertise might be needed during national security emergencies. But it also raised questions about privacy rights and the obligations of former military personnel to remain available for consultation, regardless of their civilian career choices. Owen Sullivan, Iris's school friend, whose father served on a destroyer based at the naval facility, had become a source of playground conversations about Iris's family and her father's role in the submarine rescue. The 8-year-old social dynamics of elementary school had transformed Iris from an anonymous research technician's daughter into a local celebrity whose classmates wanted to hear about submarines and military emergencies. "Iris," my dad says, "your dad is famous now for saving all those submarine people," Owen told her during recess, his comment reflecting the community recognition that had made it impossible for the Murphy family to maintain their previous low profile in Monterey Bay's small population. "I guess so," Iris replied, feeling uncertain about the attention and recognition that seemed to make adults excited but created complications for her family's normal life. "I just wish people would stop calling our house and asking to interview my dad about submarine engineering." Mrs. Catherine Miller, Iris's elementary school teacher, had noticed changes in Iris's behavior and attention that reflected the stress and disruption that her family was experiencing as a result of Leonard's involvement in the submarine rescue. The 8-year-old was struggling with adult pressures and decisions that affected her life in ways she couldn't fully understand or control. Iris seems more withdrawn lately, and she's mentioned concerns about moving away from Monterey Bay. Mrs. Miller told Dr. Laura Murphy during a parent conference that addressed Iris's educational and emotional needs during a period of family uncertainty. How can the school support her during this transition period? Laura appreciated the teacher's concern, while recognizing that Iris's emotional well-being depended largely on adult decisions about Leonard's future military involvement that hadn't been resolved. Mrs. Miller, we're trying to make decisions that will provide Iris with stability and normal childhood experiences. But Leonard's expertise has created obligations and opportunities that are difficult to balance with family priorities. Dr. Silva, representing the Chen Marine Research Station's perspective, attended the Pacific Fleet Headquarters inquiry to discuss Leonard's employment status and the research station's position regarding his continued civilian work in marine science. Admiral Marine Captain Murphy has been an exemplary employee whose technical knowledge and problem-solving abilities have contributed significantly to our marine research programs. We would welcome his continued involvement in civilian capacity regardless of any military consulting arrangements. The statement provided Leonard with assurance that civilian employment options remained available, but it also highlighted the complexity of balancing multiple professional obligations and family considerations that had been created by his decision to reveal his submarine engineering expertise during the USS Nautilus emergency. As the formal inquiry continued through the afternoon, the Murphy family faced decisions that would determine whether Leonard's 8 years of civilian life had been a temporary interruption of his military career or a permanent transition to a different kind of service that could be managed without sacrificing family stability and privacy. Admiral Marine concluded the session by emphasizing that any decisions about Leonard's future military involvement would require balancing national security needs with family considerations, and that the pressure would be applied to force choices that would be detrimental to his wife and daughter's well-being. Captain Murphy, the Navy recognizes your right to maintain civilian life and family priorities, but we also hope you will consider ways to share your expertise that can improve submarine safety and prevent future emergencies like the one that nearly claimed 130 lives. Admiral Marine stated, her final comments outlining institutional respect for Leonard's personal choices while maintaining hope for continued professional consultation. The Murphy family left Pacific Fleet Headquarters with important decisions, still pending, but with clearer understanding of their options and the consequences associated with each possible choice about Leonard's future relationship with military service and submarine engineering consultation. 6 months later, Leonard Murphy stood in the renovated laboratory facility that had been constructed adjacent to the Chen Marine Research Station, watching through large windows as Iris fed marine biology samples to the touch tank inhabitants that had become her favorite research subjects. The compromise solution that had emerged from months of negotiations allowed Leonard to serve as Director of Civilian Submarine Safety Consultation while maintaining his family's residence in Monterey Bay and his daughter's enrollment in local schools. Dad, the sea stars are responding differently to water temperature changes than Dr. Silva predicted, Iris announced, her observation reflecting the natural scientific curiosity that had been nurtured through her exposure to both marine biology and submarine engineering. I think they're adapting to seasonal variations faster than the computer models suggested they would. Leonard smiled at his daughter's growing sophistication in scientific observation and hypothesis formation, recognizing that her experience with the submarine crisis had accelerated her intellectual development, while teaching her that complex problems often required interdisciplinary thinking. That's an excellent observation, sweetheart. Have you discussed your findings with Dr. Silva and the other marine biologists? I'm writing a report for the junior research program that Dr. Silva created for students who want to learn about marine. Is science, Iris replied, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had learned that age didn't disqualify valuable contributions to scientific understanding. Owen Sullivan is helping me with the statistical analysis because he's really good at mathematics. The junior research program represented one of several positive developments that had emerged from the publicity surrounding the submarine rescue, as educational institutions and research organizations had created opportunities for young people to engage with scientific concepts and technical problem-solving. Iris's involvement in the program reflected her family's decision to embrace the changes in their lives, while finding ways to channel renewed public attention toward constructive educational outcomes. Professor Judith Parker, who had become a regular collaborator in Leonard's civilian consultation work, arrived at the laboratory facility carrying technical documentation for a new submarine safety evaluation project that would examine vulnerability assessments across multiple submarine classes. Leonard, the preliminary analysis of fleet-wide power distribution systems has identified potential cascade failure vulnerabilities in 17 different submarine configurations. Your expertise is proving invaluable for developing preventive modifications. The ongoing consultation work had evolved into a comprehensive submarine safety program that utilized Leonard's knowledge while allowing him to maintain civilian status and family priorities. His documentation of previously rejected safety recommendations had prompted systematic reviews of submarine engineering that were producing significant improvements in naval technology without requiring his return to active military service. Professor Parker, I'm particularly concerned about the newer attack submarine power management systems, Leonard replied, pointing to technical diagrams that showed potential failure modes similar to those that had nearly claimed the USS Nautilus. The electrical load balancing algorithms are more sophisticated, but they may be creating single points of failure that could disable multiple backup systems simultaneously. Dr. Laura Murphy had successfully transitioned from marine biologist to research director for Monterey Bay Environmental Studies, a position that allowed her to coordinate scientific collaboration between civilian research institutions and military environmental monitoring programs. Her expertise in marine ecosystems had proven valuable for assessing the environmental impact of naval operations and developing protective protocols for sensitive marine habitats. Leonard, the environmental impact assessment for the new submarine. Training exercises shows minimal ecosystem disruption if we implement the monitoring protocols that Iris suggested during last month's research presentation, Laura reported. Her acknowledgement reflecting their daughter's growing recognition as a contributor to scientific research, rather than merely an observer of adult work. The family had discovered that their forced transition from anonymity to public recognition had created opportunities for meaningful collaboration between military technology and civilian science that benefited both naval operations and environmental protection. Their experience with the submarine crisis had demonstrated the value of interdisciplinary expertise and family involvement in addressing complex technical challenges. Commander Stanley Mitchell, who had been promoted to captain following his exemplary leadership during the USS Nautilus emergency, visited the laboratory facility to discuss ongoing submarine safety improvements and to express personal gratitude for Leonard's continued consultation work. Captain Murphy, the power system modifications based on your recommendations have been implemented fleet-wide, and submarine crews report significantly improved emergency response capabilities. The successful implementation of Leonard's safety recommendations had vindicated his original concerns about submarine vulnerability, while providing concrete evidence that civilian expertise could contribute meaningfully to military technology improvement. His consultation work had influenced submarine engineering standards that would protect naval personnel for decades to come. Captain Mitchell, I'm gratified that the safety modifications are proving effective, but the real credit belongs to the submarine crews who are implementing improved emergency procedures and monitoring protocols, Leonard replied, his characteristic modesty reflecting personal satisfaction with technical achievements that served larger purposes than individual recognition. Iris had become a frequent speaker at elementary schools throughout Monterey Bay, sharing her experience with the submarine rescue and encouraging other students to pursue science and engineering education. Her presentations emphasized that complex problems could be solved through careful observation, logical thinking, and willingness to speak up when you had valuable information to contribute. What I learned from helping my dad with the submarine emergency is that age doesn't matter when you understand how things work, Iris told a group of fourth-grade students at Seaside Elementary School. Adults sometimes miss simple solutions because they're thinking about problems in complicated ways, so kids can help by asking basic questions and suggesting ideas that might seem obvious. Her educational presentations had attracted attention from STEM education organizations that were developing programs to encourage young people, particularly girls, to pursue careers in science and engineering. Iris's story had become an inspiration for children who might otherwise believe that technical expertise was beyond their capabilities or interests. Mrs. Catherine Miller, Iris's teacher, had observed significant positive changes in her students' confidence and academic performance since the submarine rescue, noting that Iris's experience with contributing to adult problem-solving had enhanced her leadership skills and willingness to participate in classroom discussions. Iris has become much more assertive about sharing her ideas and helping other students with scientific concepts, Mrs. Miller reported to Laura during a parent conference. Her experience with the submarine emergency seems to have taught her that her thoughts and observations have value, and she's applying that confidence to all her academic work. Diana Foster, whose reporting on the submarine rescue had launched her career as a national correspondent for maritime and military affairs, returned to Monterey Bay to produce a documentary about the long-term impact of civilian expertise on naval safety programs. The Murphy family story demonstrates how personal sacrifice and professional expertise can combine to create lasting institutional change that saves lives and improves national security. The documentary project provided an opportunity for the Murphy family to reflect on how their lives had changed since Leonard's decision to reveal his submarine engineering expertise during the USS Nautilus crisis. Their quiet existence had been transformed into public service that balanced family priorities with meaningful contributions to naval safety and scientific education. Russell Hayes, who had been re-elected as mayor of Monterey Bay, partly based on his leadership during the submarine emergency, had established the Murphy Family Foundation for Maritime Safety Education, creating scholarships and educational programs that honored the family's contribution to naval rescue operations and scientific research. The Murphy family's courage and expertise saved 130 lives and improved submarine safety for naval personnel throughout the Pacific Fleet, Hayes announced during the Foundation's inaugural ceremony. Their ongoing commitment to education and public service continues to benefit our community and our nation. Admiral Beverly Marine, who had traveled from Pacific Fleet headquarters to attend the Foundation ceremony, presented Leonard with the Navy Distinguished Civilian Service Award, the highest recognition that could be given to non-military personnel for contributions to naval operations and personnel safety. Captain Murphy's expertise and willingness to serve when needed most exemplify the highest traditions of naval service. Whether in uniform or civilian capacity, Admiral Marine stated during the presentation ceremony. His ongoing consultation work continues to protect submarine crews and improve naval emergency response capabilities. Iris accepted a special recognition award for young contributors to naval safety, acknowledging her role in helping to identify the technical solutions that had resolved the USS Nautilus crisis. Her acceptance speech emphasized the importance of listening to children's questions and encouraging young people to participate in scientific problem solving. What I learned is that kids can help solve important problems if adults are willing to listen to our ideas and explain complicated things in ways we can understand, Iris told the audience. Her words reflecting wisdom gained through experience with technical challenges and family decisions that had shaped her understanding of responsibility and service. As the ceremony concluded, the Murphy family stood together watching the sun set over Monterey Bay, knowing that their 8 years of quiet anonymity had been permanently transformed into public service that honored Leonard's expertise while protecting their family's stability and Iris's normal childhood development. Their experience with the submarine rescue had taught them that sometimes the greatest adventures came from using knowledge and courage to help others when they needed it most. The evening light reflected off the calm waters of Monterey Bay, illuminating the spot where the USS Nautilus had surfaced 6 months earlier after being saved by an 8-year-old girl who whispered, "I can fix that," and a father whose hidden expertise had emerged when duty called him to serve his country and his fellow human beings in their moment of greatest need. Their story had become part of naval history and local legend, proving that the most extraordinary heroes often came from the most ordinary families who chose service over safety when lives hung in the balance. Leonard Murphy continued his civilian consultation work, knowing that his knowledge would always be available when submarine crews needed it most, while Iris Murphy grew up understanding that intelligence, courage, and willingness to help others were the most important qualities anyone could possess, regardless of age or background. Their quiet life in Monterey Bay had become something far more meaningful than they had ever imagined possible, demonstrating that sometimes the greatest adventures were found not in seeking excitement, but in using whatever gifts you possessed to make the world a safer and better place for everyone. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch, and don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot.